Good evening and welcome to the Dusty Feet. And you can tell, well, first of all, it's the 4th, right? So, was that Star Wars Day? Didn't somebody tell me that? It was Star Wars Day too? Anyways, as you can tell by the blue, this used to be joyful noise. It's now heart expressions. And as you can tell by the graphic, that Jim Achilles is in the house. And I'm so excited to have him on. He's going to be the primary contributor for this. And this is tip of the iceberg. And we're just going to have a total blast with Jim. And we're looking forward to everything that's going to go there. So, the website on YouTube, of course, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon if you want to be remembered, to remind you, in other words. On Twitter, we'll get updates, any news changes, any late changes, all that kind of stuff. And as you can see by the webpage itself, links at the top will give you all the different series that we have in the past episodes so you can catch up and keep us where we're going, although we're launching up on this one. So tonight we have Jim Achilles, which is, I'm looking forward to this series. We had it as joyful noise, and yet I know we talked about, we had dance, sign language, nature. And so I was really pondering and decided, it needed a more accurate thought. So heart expressions came to mind, and it did. And then I talked to Jim Achilles and said, Jim, what do we want to, did he have any subtitle that we wanted to give to this part and what we were doing and stuff? And it was created to create. And I fell in love with it. I said, that is absolutely brilliant. So that's where we're going to launch off of and go as we start tonight. Originally, it had the beginning on the title because we only had beginning. We didn't know. And then we walked on from there. So here we go. And as always on the Dusty Feet, this is a place where we can safely explore the endless ways of God, interconnection of His creation, where belief understandings may be challenged, divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. So here we go on the Dusty Feet. And there, folks, is Jim Achilles.
Hello, all. It's good to
There
see
you
you.
go. Thanks for being here. You have no idea how excited I am that we get to do this. I'm going to tap into your brain, and to be truthful, I'm also looking forward to us connecting / reconnecting.
Yeah.
We've actually known of each other, meaning you were best friends with Jimmy. For all of you know who Jim is. So how long do you guys go back?
We met as freshmen in high school. We were both attending LA Baptist High School. I just moved to LA and we connected right away in class and in band. He was a clarinet player, which I don't fault him for. I was a trombone player in this tiny little band, and we just did so much together. Later on in that year, we were in a Christian movie together, Sizzling
Was that the
Skateboards.
skateboard movie?
That was the skateboard movie, yeah.
Yeah.
And
We're gonna have to
the
talk about that. Maybe it's a good point for to get the three of us on and talk about that.
that is
Or
a really
should we?
fun movie to watch for the pain it creates, looking back on what it was like to live in 1978
There you go.
and be in high school at that delicate age.
Well, yeah. So as you can tell by the age of us, that we've known at least of each other for a long time. Jim and Jim have done a lot of stuff together, and we'll get there eventually down the road on all of that.
Yep.
For Jim and I, it's more we've known of each other and contact this kind of stuff. But I keeping tabs on what Jim's been doing, those kind of things. It's been fun, and so I'm looking forward to one, connecting with you, and two, digging into that music creative side of your brain. So
I like the introduction you had there with the dusty feet, actual feet in dust. Now, were those your feet? Did you film that yourself?
No, actually, I've been asked that many, many, many times, and no, I paid for that stock footage.
I see. Well, it's
I
fun
paid for that
because
stock footage.
I live in the Pacific Northwest and I haven't seen dust in years. Even right now it's raining and
Yeah.
we hardly even get any mud because it's so grassy every place. And
Uh,
so it was really nice to look at dust and think of what it would be like to be warm again.
it's that, and part of that is interesting part on the Dusty Feet part was there's a point where they talk about when the people really wanted to follow the teacher that they were following, that you wanted to be so close to him that the dust from his sandals, the dust from as he walked, got on you. That's good dirt. In other words, because at that time, because we had that point where Jesus is telling them when he sends out the 70. I think people forget that he's not sending out the 12. He sends out 70 of his disciples out, and he sends them out. And he says, and if they turn you away, reject you, said no problem, turn around, knock the dust off your sandals, and move on. Go to the next place. You don't talk about bad about him, do any of that stuff. So that dusty sandal thing has so much to do in those kind of things, and it's part of the
Yeah.
journey thing. So that's all. Nothing real,
Nice.
not that neat, but yeah, no,
I like it.
that's stock footage. My wife, she picks on me, and I joke, I'm a closed-toed shoe guy. I just kind of always have been. I don't wear a lot of sandals and open-toed. So she go, no, because he doesn't wear sandals.
There you go.
There you go. So
There you go.
and that's
Very
good.
good.
But okay, so what is on created to create? We might as well take off from here. So
Yeah.
what brought that thought, which again I love, and then where do we want to like begin this journey from? So and for a little bit, maybe start by giving people a little background on you. Who's Jim Achilles? That's gonna
Well,
be
yeah.
tough one.
And I'll start this way. I've always loved creative things, and I've been amazed at people who are super creative, whether it be anything in the arts, anything, even watching a great football play, and seeing
Yeah,
somebody with the kind of reflexes to create an opening where there was none. In architecture, in landscaping, I don't care what it is. When a human puts his fingers to something and makes something, maybe craftsmanship. My social media feed for a while was full of people making stuff because I just find those things fascinating. How they come up with these ideas for using epoxy to create rivers in wood that become a table.
yeah, yeah.
Anything creative like that has just captured my attention. And for a while, I wondered, why is that? Because obviously God is the ultimate creator, and we don't create things at a human level. Ultimately, in the best of ways, for something that magnifies us or makes us look good. But as a creator myself, I have to create. It's this weird compulsive thing that won't let me not create. And so for me, if we walk through Barnes and Noble and we walk past the aisle of empty journals, I want to buy like 18 of them because they're empty pages that need to be filled. I want to write in them. And I've got a bunch of empty journals that I haven't even started yet. Blank music paper just draws me in. Like, man, somebody needs to write something on this paper.
Yeah.
We need to create something here. I'm constantly seeing venues. Like I'll go to a restaurant and I'll immediately see the layout and say, well, when's your live music? You've got this layout waiting for someone to come in and create tones that are there.
Yeah.
And so my eyes are open to those kinds of things. And whether it be, I have a creative bug. I doubt that I've had, and I say this in all honesty, I doubt that I've had an original thought in my life. I just I love so many different things and assimilate so many different styles and pieces of content, and knowledge and information, and it all gets thrown in the mix and comes out as something that I did in the creation of it. But that desire to latch onto things and then make them say something from me. So let me add a little bit more to that. My father was a professional jazz musician who came to know the Lord and then over time went into full-time ministry. He went from a guy who was playing, the first time I saw him live, he was in the pit orchestra behind Barbara Eden in Las Vegas because
Oh
I was
my.
born in Las Vegas. And
Okay.
He had been on the road with Harry James and the Harry James Orchestra. He played Carnegie Hall. He's in the Encyclopedia of Jazz. I mean, he's top of his game. We're not talking about just some guy who was playing in a piano bar in Dinuba. You know, he was the top of his game, and left that when he came to know the Lord, first out of disillusionment that he had, spent his life in pursuit of himself, and he felt very guilty about that. And then after several years, some mature Christians came along and said, no, maybe God gave you this ability for a reason. So even as a pastor who would go on to preach 50 to 60-minute long expository messages that were very lawyer-like in their presentation, you would never think that this guy would pick up a clarinet and flat whale, but he would. And we'd listen to jazz together, and he would be very judgmental in a good way, critical in a good way,
Right.
of different solos that he'd hear. And he would say, that guy's not saying nothing. He's just playing scales. He's not saying anything through the horn.
Ooh. And
And
it's funny you say that, because I've made that comment about some artists that are singing a song, right? Especially these young kids. They get these kids to play these songs, and you go, you're not saying anything. You're singing the words and the melodies there, and there's some skill to your voice and technique, but you're not saying anything. Like you said,
yeah.
you're missing something. I like that.
And part of that is because they haven't lived yet.
Oh yeah.
I mean, when you talk about the blues artist,
Oh.
you talk about B.B. King. B.B. King and Victor Wooten, bass player, actually has a video out where he talks about this. How B.B. King would never have won a guitar shredder competition in any context because that wasn't his thing. But he sat there with what few notes he used, and he used them to say so much that he played to pack houses everywhere he went because it touched the way people felt. And music that says something does that. And when you come from a life and you're singing something that isn't real to you, it's pretentious. And the audience, if it's intelligent, will sit back and realize that and say, this is kind of pretentious. Okay, it's good. It's technically really amazing.
Yeah.
But you're not singing about something you really know about. If you got a teenager singing some bop music about young teen love, great, you got it all day because you've done that. You do that shtick. But it kind of cracks me up because there's a lot of young people, especially in the Christian music realm, that sing a lot of songs about how hard a life they've had.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah,
dude, you're 24 years old. Okay, I don't want to be cruel. Maybe you've had some really traumatic things happen, but man, you've only begun.
Oh,
But anyway.
when they say this is the greatest thing in my life, and you go, you're still a kid. That's not the great. It's like
Right.
Yeah.
Which actually, I actually am encouraged by that because I was that kid at one point in time. And after all of these years and all the challenges that I've dealt with in life and all my own failures, I still believe. The testing of faith produced endurance, James 1 says, and I've experienced that in my own life. So I praise God for that. But Dad would sit there and he'd just go, "That guy's being pretentious," and then he'd hear someone who was really speaking through the instrument, and so like some of the greats at improvisation that I love, like for instance Larry Carlton is a guitar player. One of the reasons he's so good is because he listened to and mimicked sax players who had to breathe. And so he would improvise in ways that sounded like a human rather than just a guitar shredder who's an endless stream of notes without any body to it.
Oh wow.
B.B. King, of course, on the guitar. You've got that. It's the whole Kenny G thing with jazz. A lot of people would look at Kenny G and just say he's just doing a grandstand of how many scales can he play. And I kind of get that a little bit. When I listen to him, I don't necessarily get that he's really speaking through the horn kind of bit. But if you want to go listen to somebody who really speaks through the horn, go listen to anything Sam Butera ever did. It was real show bent. It was very do you know who Sam Butera was? You're Louis Prima?
Yes. Okay.
Louis Prima and Keeley Smith in Las Vegas in the late 50s, early 60s. They were the hottest act in show business at that time. Louis Prima became the voice of the orangutan in the Jungle Book cartoon. Right. Well, Sam Butera was a sax player. And he would get out there on stage and he would play Night Train. Google Sam Butera playing Night Train, and he's looking like it's the hardest thing that he's ever done. It's not really, he's not all over the place. He's just making each note talk, and it's so much fun to listen to, and it communicates all the angst that is supposed to go. So anyway, digression. All that to say, as a creator, I was kind of tuned early to this issue of what are you actually saying? To quote Steve Taylor, if your music's saying nothing, save it for the dentist chair. say something with your music. And I'd love to at some point in time hit the technical expertise where my music actually talks. That's the goal. That what I feel inside, and this is one of those improvisation things with jazz. All right, can I heart expressions? Right, can I take what I'm feeling inside my heart and communicate it through an instrument so
Yeah.
that someone else out there can latch onto it and say, "I feel what you feel."
Yeah.
I do this with my students. Another thing about me, I'm a full-time music teacher right now in a tiny little school district in logging country on the Oregon coast. And in all the years I've taught music, I do this a lot. I usually take a period at some point in time, and I play music they've never heard. And I ask them, what is the story that's being told? And they come back, and oftentimes I have students nail it. They'll hit it right on the head. They'll say, oh, well, that sounds like this kind of a story. And I go, good, because the name of that song is, there you go. And they find out that the music, it's instrumental, actually communicates a story that they can understand, and they nail it because it's heart speaking to heart. So I want to be, as a creator, I want to be someone who expresses what's going on in my life. I have to do that in some way. If I can't actually perform somewhere, then I'll write, I'll compose. If I'm on a writer's block or a composing block, I can't really get anything out. I'll find some other way to create. I've had some fun projects that, in the middle of really dead times, and I had to get my hands on something. I made a guitar. I built a bike, a single speed bike. It's like, I got to do something right now. I got to make something. And it's a part. And so in thinking that through in my own personality, why is that the case? And I came to the conclusion that as we consider the attributes of God that belong to every human being, we call them the communicable attributes, right?
Ooh, that's
Those
a good
things.
phrase. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, communicable attributes. God made us in his image. And so there are things in his common grace that all of us can naturally do as a part of being made in the image of God. We can reason, we can emote, we can think stuff through, we can communicate well. We can bend all of those things toward evil purposes. Or even the person who has rejected God can still use that intellect and that creativity to do amazing things. Look at Mozart and go watch the movie Amadeus.
Oh, yeah.
What a pig he was, and yet, or as the movie portrayed him.
Right.
And yet he was creating this amazing stuff. That is a great
Yeah.
movie to think through about the issues of who God invests creative prowess in.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, God is the creator. He made us in his image, and we can't create something that from things that don't already exist. Even if we're going to create some mystical creature, we're going to make him with wings because wings already exist, and he's going to have some kind of feet. We don't know how to create something that doesn't already exist. But just like in music or art, we take what God has already given us. We take the ingredients, and in his I think with his blessing, we mix them up and we come up with something that hasn't been seen before at a human level, or hasn't been seen in a while, or some new expression that expresses that we are made in the image of God. And I think it's further proof that mankind is made that. Nobody else creates. Dolphins are intelligent creatures, but they don't do paintings.
No.
Birds sing, but it's instinctual. It's beautiful, but they don't write symphonies. Humans are unique and they're created in the image of God, and they demonstrate that through creating amazing things. And when humans are free to create, man, the stuff that they come up with, I'm continually amazed. It's like, when do we hit the tipping point? When do people stop breaking athletic records? When do they stop composing great music because it's already been all composed? I don't know. It keeps getting more and more because we're made in the image of God, and we're capable of doing those things.
Well, there's that.
It always fascinates me.
That point with in creation, where God says that's the point. Create for 6 days, take Sabbath off, right? Because I'm setting an example for you. Go ahead and do that because you're going to work in my image. So do this. So I'm giving you that template to work under, and that template then expands to years of treatment of the land, to all kinds of things that go with that. But it all boils down to that creation mentality. Even when you're tilling the earth, even when you're working the soil and you're doing that, when it's kind of funny because he talks about this and then it gets into bread. And the weird part is, bread is a down the line concept. There's a lot that goes on to making bread. That is not, mixing honey from a beehive and putting it in water, making sweet water. That's not there's you're a lot down the pike. That's kind of a back talked in story with scripture, but that the creativity to do that, and what were bumps from God, maybe, and what were us mimicking, especially with sound. Like you said, it's not original sound. We've mimicked something somewhere, nature, whatever, and then we use instruments to create the sound again. And then we, in the creativity, put the sounds together and we get it to
Right.
communicate. Yeah,
Right.
that goes beyond, like dolphins talk to other dolphins, like you said, and birds are talking to other birds. That's what they're doing when they're doing, where they're with the musical element in particular, you're conveying to multiple people multiple things, and it can be taken differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thinking through that part of creation in the image of God in each person, I think people are most fulfilled in their activities when they're creating something. And when people, and I
Phrase.
know some of this is personality driven, different personalities do different things creative wise. But I think even the person with the least creative personality is still going to be more fulfilled when they have product at the end of the labors.
Yeah.
That and they're going to feel. Why do we talk about feeling inhuman when you're on an assembly line and you're just putting lids on a jar,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you do a dead end job that does nothing? You have to find, if you're going to flip burgers at a fast food place for the rest of your life, you've given up.
Yeah.
There's certainly, and maybe that's an indication of something emotionally or spiritually in you that doesn't see the freedom to pursue producing something, creating something. And people that are most fulfilled in the workplace, I don't know, maybe, and I don't want to be too judgmental of that, maybe somebody who's flipping burgers at a fast food place might have a greater fulfillment creating burger masterpieces in a restaurant they own when they reach a level of maturity
Right.
where they can do that.
Right. Right.
But we think it is inhuman to put people in situations where their ultimate life work is not producing something they created. And we think it's abusive.
It it's an interesting point that what are we inspiring and aspiring others to do, and how do we equip them? How do we encourage them? Yeah, that there, you just said a mouthful.
And that was something with my parents I was grateful for. My mom just passed away last week. And
And by the way,
so
condolences. Seriously.
I appreciate that. She's home with the Lord, and we're grateful for that. She was a super creative educator, speaker at events and things like that. I get the educator side of me from my mom, and I get the music side of me from my dad, and it's a nice mix. But my parents, they constantly drilled into me: you can do what you want to do. You set your mind to it. You can do it. And they let me try all kinds of things, but a few. they didn't want me pursuing anything that would have led me to a professional career in the arts. I couldn't take a performance degree. I had to take an education degree so I could do something useful with it. Because my dad had spent his career for a season playing professional live music. And I think they knew as parents that I would really fall apart in that kind of environment. I'd be taken up with too many temptations or problems or whatever else. So,
Yeah.
my parents would let me play guitar because they figured I'd go play rock and roll with it and want to join a band. So I had to play the trombone,
Yeah.
And I picked up
Unless you're going to be
guitar.
the white guy in Earth, Wind, and Fire or something. Yeah, I would say.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Or,
Well,
or Chicago. They had those bands, so it'd be fair. But go on. Yeah.
let's see. That's a perfect example because if you
Yeah.
watch any of the documentaries on Chicago, you find out at their height of fame, they were also cocaine addicts to the core.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You
And
don't. Yeah.
it was
You want. Yeah. The stories behind them. Yeah. Behind the
Yep,
curtain
yep.
is not pretty.
So, and the same thing, I was into acting and drama and musical theater. I got accepted at Southern Methodist University on a musical theater audition. That was a big deal. And I couldn't
Really?
afford it to go. Yeah. Do you remember Kevin King?
Yeah.
Me and Kevin King, our teacher was a Southern Belle, and she wanted us to go to, Mrs. Owen, she wanted us to go to Southern Methodist
Go
University
to
in Dallas.
SMU. Okay.
Yeah, SMU. And I guess they have a really huge, or did at the time, musical theater program. And
Yeah.
she kind of twisted her arms into auditioning. There were over 3,000 auditions for 30 freshman spots. That's how they billed it to us.
Wow.
And they offered both Kevin and I open spots into
Oh
SMU.
my.
And that really turned the course of my life, because up to that point in time, I couldn't wait to get out of school. I was never going to be in school again the rest of my life. I don't care, whatever it took.
Right.
And all of a sudden it was like, well, I could go to school and study something I want. That's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And I ended up doing that, but I took music instead of theater, and the rest is history.
Right.
But anyway, that my parents didn't really encourage that so much, because they knew, I think, what a life in that kind of environment could lead to, and they really wanted to discourage that and send me into education. But they at the same time were, you can do what you want. You can create this. Here, try leather tooling. Here, try woodworking. They were constantly throwing stuff at me to try
Wow.
out. And that kind of environment was so productive, and it gave me that feeling of, I really can do anything if I really want to do that. Then what
Right.
do I really want to do? What am I passionate about?
Yeah. There's. I wonder if, because I think we have these sides of us, right? Facets. We're not just two pieces of paper, we're gems, and we have facets to us. And if you look at some gems, a lot of gems, there's one major facet, the pristine surface, the top of the classic diamond shape, and you get to look down and see, and there's that pristine that gets a chance to peek to the inside of what the rest of the facets are going to draw light from, and bring light into. And I wonder if we have some, depending on what their creative elements are. And I think we don't look at, when we think of farming, when we think of the things, we don't think of them in creative elements. And yet I think we do those jobs a disservice when we do. And then, animal husbandry and stuff, where we glance over the creative elements that are part of those. We have our creative arts that we've created, Western culture, many years down the pike. I don't think there was a creative arts department in Jerusalem. So I didn't think that wasn't a discussion that was part of the chat of the day. We know that Greek culture was very much getting into that. That's where actors came from. That's where we get hypocrite from. But today that's a bad term, meaning we use it, and it's developed into a derogatory term. Back then it was not derogatory at all. That was the word for actor. We've separated that term. But that's what that term was for, as they were developing the creative side of that. And that was basically just saying, I'm playing one part, but that's not really me. I mentioned that last week, where I was going, I'm sorry, but Johnny Depp is not Jack Sparrow, and Harrison Ford is not Indiana Jones. They go and they play their part, and they make you believe that this character exists. It's so funny when we do. You've seen on social media, people will argue over what a character would do.
Right.
And you go, the writers wrote their lines. There was somebody that wasn't Johnny Depp and wasn't Harrison Ford that wrote their lines. And so they determined what they did.
Yep.
Yeah. With us and our ability to be that, whatever that creative element is,
Yeah.
And
by the way,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go.
Say I love the acting thing as a picture of that, because you take a movie in an acting situation, you have a character created by a writer that is then passed off to an actor who must own it and be creative himself in how he produces it. And all because, in an ideal setting, because there's something about that character's story that needs to be said.
Yeah.
Either that, or he's getting paid an inordinate amount of money, or he wants to be famous. But in a pure artistic sense of the word, there's something in the story that needs to be said.
Right.
And he feels that, and that's why method acting, he steps into the role and becomes that thing. And it's really creative. I love Spencer Tracy once said that acting is the easiest thing in the world to do. Just don't be caught doing it.
That's a phrase.
So it is. It's a great phrase.
Yeah.
And a part of that too, I've had the chance to do that. I've done yeah, mostly community theater stuff. I got to play Tevye on Fiddler on the Roof,
Oh,
and I
it's
got
he's
to
one of my favorite
blah
characters of yeah.
blah. I love it,
Oh
love
yeah.
it. That was a great privilege to do, and been involved with some award-winning productions in the Sacramento area and things like
Mhm.
that. And the same thing, I'm looking for a story that needs to be told. What is it about the
Yeah.
story, even if it's not innately um, a Christian story?
Right.
I'm still looking. What is the value of the story? Is it redemptive? Does it
Yeah.
declare something truthful? Is it worth meditating on? Is worth thinking about? Then I'm free to join into that. Apply my creative skills in or gifts, call them gifts,
Hmm.
in making a character come alive or making a show or production come to life. And it's not just about, let's make the people laugh today. We're going to make people laugh.
Yeah.
What's being said? What that someone's going to walk away and think about. I mean, that's part of the creative thing for me.
Oh.
Is am I doing something worthwhile?
Oh, that's huge. And stifling one people that need to express that and that story's told is something. I think of actors sometimes. I wanted to say this too, that you'll hear them say they'll talk about their character like it's a real person, or say this person would do this, right? Because you see them, they'll talk about what their character is in the show and da da, and she's come from a rough childhood and da da da. So you got a bio paragraph at best. But the other part was reading the lines and then envisioning something in your head as to what that character was going to become. Like with Johnny Depp and the nuances of his character movements. And he's one of those very diverse. I'm not using him as a role model by any stretch of the imagination, but he has so many diverse ways to express that his characters don't blur, they don't overlap. Not like
Right.
Jack Nicholson is Jack Nicholson, right?
Right.
That's
Keanu
what I mean.
Reeves is
No,
always Keanu
Keanu
Reeves.
Reeves, Clint Eastwood.
Right.
They're all Stallone. They're this guy, and you put him here, and they're this guy,
Right.
and you put him here, and that's the role you get, and you're going to get it. That's going to be a box office draw because they want to go see this person. Then
Right.
there's the one, show me the character, bring me into it.
Paul
Tom
Giamatti.
Hanks does roles,
Tom
I
Hanks,
think,
yeah.
except for Joe versus the Volcano. That's his one mistake, of which he will tell himself. He wish he could take it off his
Yes.
resume. But he does like telling stories, and he does like being the character. And is this a story worth telling? Even to the point of animation, where he took on the voice of Woody with Toy Story. Again, he thought it was a cute story worth telling, so he, brings that.
You,
He's that kind of actor. But
he's a writer.
yes.
He's written short stories. You can buy him published short stories.
And he's probably like you, he needs to create. If he's not doing one thing, he's doing another.
Well, right, exactly. And that's part of the thing. There's a creative gift. I mean, we're all creative in some way, and we apply creative energies to whatever we're doing, and that's why we find some level of fulfillment in God's common grace.
Do you think
But
we
there
all
people,
are doing that, and we were maybe squashed? Because some people will tell you, "I'm not creative." Do you think it's because something was squashed?
let me
That's
answer that with this.
Okay.
I've only met one person in my life who couldn't sing. And the reason why he couldn't sing is because he'd worked with diesel engines, and it was the strangest thing. He wanted to join my choir, and he had perfect pitch down to like a C, and then everything below the C, because something had damaged his ears, he couldn't hear the pitch,
Right.
and I couldn't find a way to fix that. Apart from that, every other person I've ever worked with who has given me time, I've been able to get them on pitch, on their ears, and with a tone in their voice that they can actually sing within
wow.
a group. And
Okay.
like what's one of the things as a high school choir director, one of the things that I love to do, kids would come in on the first day of class and I pass the syllabus out. Actually, the first thing they do, they walk in the class and I'm throwing them up in the risers and I'm warming them up with the piano. The very first thing they do in choir class is sing. And then we go over the syllabus and take roll. And I'm telling them, look, this is your first time in choir. We were in a small community. Most of them had no experience in choir before or anything. And I said, in March, we are going to sing the national anthem a cappella for the Sacramento Kings on live television.
Oh wow.
And the kids were like, you got to be kidding me.
Panic.
There's
Yeah,
no way.
yeah.
And sure enough, I did it enough times that they were ready by March. And we did the national anthem. And we actually won an award from the Sacramento Kings for being the best community group that did a performance.
How cool.
We won an award for that. And because a lot of times when people think, well, I can't sing, it's because they've been told by some, pardon me, idiot parent or
Yeah.
moron who
Yeah.
has the nerve to say to another human being, you can't sing.
Yeah.
I just want to.
Hmm.
I want to treat people violently
Yeah.
who do that to other people. Why in the world would you ever tell someone you can't sing,
Yeah.
or that? And actually, a nice way to put it. I've heard all the stories of kids who have been beat down about their talents and skills.
Yeah.
You know, and rather than encouraged. And yet, I've never met a kid who can't get it if they apply their ears to it and they get past the demeaning statements that people make to them
Hmm.
about something
Yeah.
like singing. So I
Yeah.
think that the same thing is probably true about all things creative. When people are drawn out for who they are and given freedom to pursue things that they love,
Yeah.
even if they don't spend their whole life in a particular realm and bounce back and forth from this to that,
Right.
they can find that they too will have their own niche where they feel like they want to. It could be in the kitchen. I don't know. I mean, what do you want to do? It can
Right.
be something simple as the service that you render,
Yeah.
pouring yourself into it and owning it in a creative way.
Hmm.
Uh, if a person feels free to do that so that they take fulfillment in what they're doing at the moment, rather than buying into the demeaning statements of those around them. And for the record, I would never be violent with another person. I was just speaking purely
Speaking
emotionally
purely
about my
emotional
disregard.
and hypothetically, yeah. There you go.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting because I know that in our, for instance, in our parents' love for their kids, and I'll default to parents love their kids. You know, that we know there are people that don't. Okay, so I'm not
Right.
I'm not using that as an all inclusive, but a default statement that so many either one were broken and told they couldn't, so how can my children do it? Two, I tried something creative and it was taken from me. And my grandfather was, I saw his art, and it was like you said, it spoke. In other words, you could see what he did, and this was a man who wanted to create, and it was squashed. And looking back and seeing that, I just can't imagine the pain that went on in his life because he didn't get to do that. And by the time I saw this stuff, he was an old man. So we're talking, 50 years of, and probably more, like by the time he died, 60 years, 70 years of that don't, can't, not, whatever, that beats you down in life, and it just beats. And I wonder if somebody like David, okay, King David, was the entire opposite antithesis, where he was given free reign to be creative. And it showed in his reign, it showed in the Psalms, it showed in the land. There was so much because he let people be one. You get that but then what he portrayed, and he went out, and I can't think of the volumes that are lost of the Psalms, just the Psalms that we have no music to. So this is who it tells you who it's for this, that, and you go, okay, so there's music to this, and it did exist. Back then it wasn't written. I'm guessing the point, it was just passed down. So it was musician to musician to musician, at which point somebody finally deemed they didn't want to pass the story around anymore. And then it disappeared and forever lost. Can we get that back? Is that, or are we destined to create more?
See, I think there's a sad part of that, which is that we don't know how it was done.
Right.
But the good part of that is that we have God's permission and blessing to apply our creative energies to modernizing the context.
Right.
We sing to the Lord a new song, not just an old song. And we do know, I mean, I think the same thing. If we knew how David sung it, we'd probably have the saying hang up over that with, what if we found the Ark of the Covenant, something
That's
would
an
become a
interesting point.
relic.
I never thought of it that way. That's an interesting thought. I had never thought of it that way. I like that.
Well, it's true. We'd end up
Yeah.
becoming legalistic about it, and we'd say, "I'm sorry, we can't do jazz in the church because David wasn't a jazz
Because
drummer."
David wasn't jazz. Yeah.
When in actuality, he probably was. I mean, because he
That's what's
understood
scary.
dissonance
He's
and
probably-
resolution. So,
Probably,
you
yeah.
know, if David had been around today, man, he would have totally been a guitar player. It's the closest thing to the harp of 10 strings. What can you say?
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of David, and I want to get to this somewhere down the road, but we were talking about creative people that make you feel something. You introduced me to a composer, David Whitacre.
Eric Whitacre.
Eric Whitacre, thank you.
Yeah.
That has penned a bunch, but particularly what you want was When David Wept. And I encourage people. Did I put it in the link?
Oh,
If it's
when
not in
David-
the link in the description, I'll put the link in the description. I'll update it tonight,
Yeah.
so it'll be there tomorrow. But go listen to that. Maybe we'll play some clips for it if we can get permission and don't get copyrighted on it to play some snips from it. But talking about something where to hear something and it take you somewhere and is a story told. And the irony of the story is if you read the story, this is not a good moment in his life, nor will it be a good moment. But you feel everything. He gets chastised for this. If you read in the scriptures what he's penning, what we hear him singing about the death of his son, he gets chastised for by a prophet afterwards. And yet it is still a real feeling and a real emotion. And I believe he captured it in this thing that it wept. I wonder what motivated him to do that.
Yes, and this is one of the things that's very interesting. It's called When David Heard.
Yeah.
And the text is When David heard that Absalom had died. And what David said is, my son, he's weeping over my son. And it's a choral piece where the choir is repeating that phrase, my son, and it's gut-wrenching. And it makes me think that maybe, now I don't know Eric Whitacre's story, but the composer who did that knows loss.
Oh, yes.
Somehow. And he's able through the music to communicate that feeling of loss. And with that feeling that he communicates, there is in the audience's re-feeling that emotion, having that emotion of loss evoked through the music. There's a comfort in connecting with others who have felt lost. So it's gut-wrenching, but it leads to a certain comfort that says, I'm not alone in this experience.
Yeah.
Now, I have a disabled daughter, a severely disabled daughter who I love indescribably much. And she has a disability called ataxia telangiectasia. It's a rare genetic disorder that probably fewer than 500 people in the United States have. And when we first got the final diagnosis that she had this disease, the medical books all said expect death in early adolescence.
Oh, wow.
And she turned 30 this year. So we've had to deal with an extended loss because we've always had this feeling of, and I mean everyone attached to her, but I'm speaking for myself really right now. Always this feeling of I only have another year or two with her, and then she's going to be gone, and then it's going to be another year or two more, and she's continuing to decline throughout that time. It's just that medical advances, though they can't provide a cure, have provided a means of extending life.
Yeah.
And she is cognitively, she's 100%. It's her body that's wasting away, like was on with Lou Gehrig's disease, although not that drastic at this point. Yeah. She's had 3 different cancer episodes, and she's had, she's diabetic in a huge way, and just one loss after another that I've walked side by side with her to experience that, and the effects that it has on those around who love and are dedicated to her care. Yeah. And so when I hear music that speaks of loss or burden and pain like that, I connect with it. Yeah. Even if it's not an issue of losing a child, even if it's like Les Mis, where I
Yeah.
dreamed a dream,
Yeah.
and she sings about the loss she has, because I love Broadway.
Right.
She sings
So
about
so
the
so so
loss
do
of,
I. Same. That's where what something we have in common with that. So yes.
yeah, yeah, and it's gut wrenching, but you're like, I have felt that pain,
Yeah.
and someone else feels that pain, and I feel for them, and in a sense, I feel like they feel for me, and in the context of evoking. Well, and one more thing, music either expresses emotion or it evokes emotion. Good music. It either expresses what I'm already feeling. So if I get home and I'm feeling melancholy and I want to put on, um, I'm feeling low key and I'm going to put on Earl Klugh and Bob James because it's a quiet jazz thing and it just helps me feel low or whatever else. It's
Yeah.
expressing what I'm feeling in the moment.
Yeah.
Uh, it's one reason why I'm not really bothered by musical styles that are grating, because there are times that I feel like that, and
Yeah.
I don't mind putting on or hearing something that maybe even somebody's yelling in the background a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I feel that, but at the same time, there is an evoking of emotion. So, like if I go to a concert and I'm listening to the music, am I willing to allow my soul to enter in, to let what's happening up there change the way I feel, so I can identify with what's happening?
Right.
Am I going to be vulnerable to it that way?
Yeah.
In so doing, how I feel can change. And that's why if I'm down and I want to change that, I can put on Pharrell because I'm happy,
Yeah.
and actually be lifted up because the emotion it's evoking can have an impact on my life.
Yeah.
And so in that realm, the creative energies that we have, um, either connect us through how we're already feeling or connect us by changing how we're feeling.
Yeah.
And that to me is a mark of music that is really good because it touches at that level. It says something. It's not pretentious. It's not presumptuous. It
Yeah.
is, it's real. And what it communicates, I get a hold of and I say I identify with that.
Right.
And that's why I say, my assumption, I don't know Eric's story, but my assumption he suffered some great loss at some point because he could write music that so describes the anguish of that loss.
Yeah. Yeah. It's if you listen to it, people, if you get a chance, it's yeah. The things that it evokes. There's no two ways around it, and it's interesting because I've heard some choral groups sing it, other groups choral sing it. I know the best one I've heard is his singers. That he has his own choral group, the Eric
Right.
Whitacre Choral Ensemble, and again, it's just what he wants to get them to bring out, what they bring out. But you think something in this, you're just speaking of is like Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. His whole range of emotions at the point where his daughter is known and he's beating his chest as he's singing. And it's just, I can't, no, no, no. Or he looks at his daughter across the way and goes, she's just this innocent little thing. How can I deny her? Or he's asking God, if
If
I
I
were a
bend
rich
that
man,
far, I will break.
I will bend
he
that.
says.
That's it. If I bend that far, I'll break. And there's just so much that music and music writers and everything says they're trying to draw us in. And it's interesting that music takes us there the quickest and probably the most repetitive. Because you can read a book, and sometimes, like you've said, if you're in a melancholy mood and you pick up the right book, it's going to speak to you more than if you're, just looking for something to fill in a hole, and it doesn't speak to you quite as much because there's so much else going on in the background. Unless you
Right.
have something that's going to draw you back there. Smell is the only other thing that draws as strong a reaction to something.
Right.
But that's always a past. In other words, you can't smell something and take you somewhere you've never been.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it never
You know,
takes you there.
Music does that. I've done a fair number of single concerts for memory care units and assisted living centers, things like that. And so I'll go in and, here in the memory care unit, here are people who have dementia or Alzheimer's really, really badly. And I come in and I start singing an old standard, an old Frank Sinatra or Fly Me to the Moon or something like that. They can't remember their family's names. They can't remember if they had lunch or if they had dinner, but all of a sudden they start singing along, "Fly me to the moon," and they're into the music. The memory is there. The music is still inside of them.
I have
I
an
find that
episode with
fascinating.
that where I talked about that on one of the other Joyful Noise, where there was an elderly lady that had the same deal. It was a video, a YouTube clip of her, that, and they started playing the song, and next thing you know, she starts singing, and her hands start moving like she's playing the piano, and it takes her back, and like you said, she didn't remember that that's her granddaughter next to her, but that took her back to wherever. I know there was where my grandmother, my dad's mom, spent her last days, was in a unit that had not only song but memorabilia. So they had a beautiful, like a trophy case, but in it was a beautiful a wedding dress and a World War I or World War II military uniform, and it was just bringing back strong points. Those are, if you lived through those were memory evoking items.
Yeah.
Like I said, World War I is a story to us. World War II is a story to us. You and I are on the edge of what Vietnam fallout was. My
Right.
dad just barely didn't go. Just
Yeah.
this close to not going. So that's the closest thing that we have to any of that. Then, of course, being in the war, and meaning now you've got the Gulf Desert Storm and blah, 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 blah. But each of those, that's their thing. I joke that what is my reminisce going to be? What's going to be in my deal? Are they going to be playing, I don't know, Guns N' Roses or something else, and or whatever's
It's
80s?
going to be parachute pants and double neon polo shirts.
Oh yeah, yep. And
Those are traumatic enough.
and we'll be sitting around in this house. People are going to go, what in the grandpa? What are you wearing?
Yep, yep.
And
Now,
I'm
here's
comfortable.
another
Thank you very much. That's a scoop.
here's another memory thing. I read, and I wish I'd saved the article. It was years ago, but a cellist. His mother was a cellist, and he would find in his career that he would come across symphonies, the cello part, that when he first saw them, he already had them memorized. And he'd
wow.
contact his mom
Right.
and find out that those were the symphonies she was playing when she was pregnant with him.
That doesn't
and
surprise
that
me.
cello tucked up against her tummy right there, and as a preborn baby, he was already memorizing music.
That's fascinating. That doesn't, not only does that surprise me, but that's where, again, created to create.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Very strong, created to create.
Right.
Okay, so we're at the end of our time. This has been fantastic, and we're going to have so much fun talking about this kind of stuff. And we'll drive topics that we want to talk about. And so people get ready, because we'll put it in our titles, and then Jim and I off air will figure out how often we're going to do this, what fits in his busy schedule, because he has a life, right? So we'll get Jim squeezed in and get his valuable input and his context, and what touches him obviously is going to be a lot. But then as we're going to try to help us all experience it and maybe look for it. In other words, I'm hoping that we draw the point that we start to look for it and maybe see it in places that we didn't see. When you see somebody working and you see something they're doing, and you can say, that was creative. I can honestly say, and I'll go to soccer as one of my defaults, is that I'll see a referee do something and I'll go, that was creative. That was like I said, of totality of what we go when they first send you to school, like scales with the thing. It boils down to scales. Everything starts there, so you have to learn the scales. Here's a screwdriver, a hammer, and a pair of pliers. And there's your toolbox, and you can do all kinds of things with those. And I'll agree, you can. Said, but by the time you get to the career that I had as a pro, I had a NASCAR war wagon. I had tools in there, and so there were times where something happened in a deal, and I said, aha! I get to do this. I've had an idea. I've thought about this. I had this scenario, and understand. It happens that fast, where I reach back open up that drawer, slap that over the wall. It's like NASCAR, slap it over the wall and do it, and it's fixed, and I throw it out there. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But then you go, oh, that was a creative way to handle that. And I talk about that afterwards in those kind of deals. And it's how the brain works in that capacity with those. And I wonder if when somebody is writing music, and you can probably attest to this statement, is that you're playing a series of notes, you're doing that, and then you try it a different way, and then you go, that I like.
It's interesting. You talk about a toolkit. When you're learning how to improvise, you're basically building what we call a lick library, a number of things you could draw upon at any time. And
okay.
when you start performing, I used to do corporate jazz gigs as a guitarist with a couple other players. And about the first hour, you're just drawing on all this stuff you've already done. And you're taken from your lick library. And then you've used them all up, and you still have another hour to go. And so in front of people, you're finally not just free, but kind of mandated to actually create. And then all of a sudden, you actually really start improvising in the moment. And there's something that takes over at that moment. Because, you're getting paid, so you want to be good. So you're playing what you know.
Right.
But after about an hour, everyone's eating their hors d'oeuvres and they're talking and whatever else. They're not really paying attention to the band. And all of a sudden, you're branching out and you're starting to actually create in the moment in front of people live. And it's like flipping a switch, and it becomes really exciting. Nobody listening is really knowing what's going on, but you're like, I wonder if I did this and tried that and go here.
Right.
And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But in that context, you've taken those tools and you've used them up. And now I'm put in a position where I got to create. I'm on the fly. It's got to happen now. And the tools are all instrumental for making that happen. They're still part of the foundation for it. But all of a sudden in the moment, we're rearranging those things and making them happen on the fly. And that's super fun for me as a musician.
Yeah, and we do this all the time here on the Dusty Feet. So there you go. That's
right.
kind of how we roll. Everybody knows that. So okay. So it's 8:00. Let's cut for the evening. Enjoy yourselves. Jim, stay there. Okay. And so there's nothing showing here because next week I'll be out of town. I won't be here. So this could just be blank, right? Be here. Here you go. So do this. There you go. The week after that, we'll figure out. I think it's going to be a free flow. I'm not really sure what I want to do because the week after that, we're going to get the break again because that's the week of Thanksgiving. And I want you all to enjoy Thanksgiving. I want you all to create family moments. I want to create family memories. I want you to just continue to build on those and with people, friends, and family, and just and have that mindset. I think that's important. December 2nd, I think is that it? Is that the first week in December for us? We'll be starting episode 11 on the Matthew series, to judge or not to judge. Okay, and that's going to bring some interesting discussion. You think the Lord's Prayer brought some interesting discussion. Each of these Matthew things bring new discussion, and it's just fun for things to think about. And I know that you're going to, your mind already goes somewhere, and I wonder if we are going to take it to a different place, which will be interesting. So let's keep that in mind. So a point to ponder, and I thought this was an interesting quote. You know how we have paradox challenges on Dusty Feet, and it's important to us because we need to stretch our minds and our mindsets. And I know Jim's going to help stretch my mind in this, which is totally cool because music is not my comfort realm. I enjoy it beyond everything. I said I love Broadway. I love musicals. My mom grew up with it. I had music on the house all the time, but I'm not a singer. I don't play an instrument. My brother leaks it. Jimmy leaks it. Those two, Jim and Jim, leaked it. But Jim is telling me there's more to you. So I'm going to have to stretch myself a little bit. This ought to be interesting. And I'll take that. That'll be a cool part. But he says, a paradox is a statement that seems self-contradictory. In reality, it may express a possible truth that I cannot see from my limited perspective. Niels Bohr, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, said it this way: the opposite of a correct statement is a false statement. The opposite of a profound truth may be another profound truth. The spiritual journey that proceeds with a trembling confidence that God's truth is too large for the simplicity of either or. It can be apprehended only by the complexity of both and. Parker J. Palmer, The Promise of Paradox, a celebration of contradictions in the Christian life. And thanks for being with us tonight, and thanks for Jim Achilles, and thanks for being with us on The Dusty Feet.